Kia ora, good evening. A total fire ban came into effect for the Southland region today. The ban is due to continued hot and dry weather, with the fire risk very high to extreme throughout most of Southland. It is unusual for a fire ban to be introduced at this time of year. The ban means that no one can light any fires in the open and suspends all existing fire permits. Principal Rural Fire Officer Mike Grant says there's a high risk that fires could get out of control.
There's big potential at the moment, and that's the reason for the ban coming on. We've been sort of looking at the situation over the last 3 weeks and monitoring it. In fact, our trigger points for putting a ban on were probably reached in most of our zones 3 weeks ago, but we've been hoping that coming out near the end of the fire season or the summer that we're going to pick up some of that rain that has been forecast, and we've just been managing it through and restricting the type of burning that people could undertake. So the reason we're putting it on is because of that potential that's out there, and the potential is actually growing every day. And we get a day like today, we've got extreme fire dangers right across the province today.
Just how high risk is it?
Well, it is. It's actually into the extreme belt today. I mean, every day that we're sitting here with wind and having mid-20 degree days is a great day. But the fire danger is between moderate and high. When we put some wind in the equation like we have today, we go from, if we look at the fire potential of something that we can control to potentially something that we can't do anything with.
Now, in terms of the fire ban that began this morning, but there have been at least a couple of incidents where people have actually broken that already.
Yeah, no, it's tricky, and there's obviously a bit of tolerance we need to show in the first couple of days because it's hard to get the message out to everybody. We hope that through yourselves and the other media that we can actually spread that message a little bit quicker. But look, we've had a couple of incidents today, and the potential in one of them was pretty big because it was in northern Southland that's really dry. It's not going to take much for a fire to outstrip firefighting resources under these conditions.
Dry conditions and low river levels are worsening by the day, but there have been no further cuts to water consent holders in Southland. 45 consent holders have been told to cease extractions or discharges due to the conditions, and if there is no rain over the weekend, it's likely more triggers will be reached. Environment Southland staff are meeting regularly to assess the situation and will meet again on Monday to look at whether further measures are needed. Southland is in the midst of a dry spell of a magnitude only seen once every 10 to 15 years and has just had a seventh of normal rainfall for March. The Reserve Bank today left the official cash rate unchanged at 2.5%, where it's sat unchanged for the past 2 years. Reserve Bank Governor Graham Wheeler says downside risks around global growth have receded in recent months and financial market sentiment has improved. Domestically, economic recovery is uneven while demand and output are expanding. The labour market remains weak and house price inflation is increasing. He says the overall dollar is undermining profitability for export and importers, and worsening drought conditions are creating difficulty. The OCR is expected to stay unchanged through to the end of the year. Preparations for a space launch are underway in the south, with a tracking station on the outskirts of Invercargill again set to play a big role in the European Space Agency launch. The Awarua tracking station will help monitor the launch of an Ariane 5 rocket scheduled to take off on June 7th. Southland plays an important role in monitoring the launch as it sits below the trajectory where the spacecraft and rocket separate. It will be the fourth time the station's played a role in monitoring an ATV launch. Herman Steenkamp is one of the technicians in the south preparing equipment and getting ready.
To support the launch of the ATV-4, which is being launched in French Guiana in about 2 months' time. So this is the setup and the preparations for that.
So how important is the work that you're doing now, and why do it so soon?
We are here to support the launch, in other words, to get the data from the spacecraft as it flies over. So there's some events that is critical for them to have, so that's why we are here in this location. Why now is we have to do a lot of testing beforehand to make 100% sure that everything is right.
And in terms of the rocket being sent up, why does it actually, why does the launch take place?
Well, it's to resupply the people on board the International Space Station. They need food, water, and some experiments, and also fuel to do some orbit maintenance on the space station itself.
Now, in terms of the actual launch, how much preparation work and how long does it take for everybody to get everything ready ahead of that?
Oh, I think roughly about a year, at least a year they start, yes.
So why so long for that?
It's a very expensive exercise, and there's so many systems involved and so many people involved, and you have to get everybody together in sync, and all the systems must be working perfectly. So I think that's just a matter of logistics, very difficult.
Coming up after the break, Southland's new stadium continues to face a shortfall. Welcome back. Farmers have agreed to help fund a program that will spend $65 million on pushing for a more sustainable and profitable meat sector. Sheep and beef farmers voted in favour of the Collaboration for Sustainable Growth Red Meat Primary Growth Partnership with 77% support. The program will see $19.7 million spent from the New Zealand Meat Board and Beef and Lamb New Zealand Reserve Funds. Beef and Lamb Chairman Mike Peterson says it's pleasing to see support for the program, which has the potential to change the sector. Farmer investment accounts for around 30% of the program's cost. Stadium Southland is a few months away from its rebuild deadline, but millions of dollars are still needed to complete the project. Local community funders have reached their limits, and now the Stadium Trust Board is pinning its hopes on the government picking up some of the deficit. With only 4 months until the scheduled finish date for the rebuild of Stadium Southland, a continued funding shortfall still faces the project. The $43 million project was $4 million short, and it's hoped the sale of naming rights and government funding will mean a $2 million shortfall. Stadium Southland General Manager Nigel Skelt says 3 potential sponsors are looking at the option.
We would expect within the next 10 days we'll be able to announce the naming rights sponsors.
Just what figure they'll raise is not known, although it's expected to make a sizable dent in the shortfall.
Significant amount of money, which will certainly help the overall deficit that we're facing at the moment, and I think the community will be well pleased with the result if we are successful in this next 3 or 4 days.
Southland Indoor Leisure Centre Charitable Trust Deputy Chair Alan Dennis says a project control group is now focused on decreasing costs and making savings across the board.
The funding question with regard to making the difference between what the insurance company puts in and betterment, obviously there's a gap there, but until we know what the insurance company are actually going to pay, towards the core block and stage 3, we don't really know what that final figure would be.
Mr Dennis says a public appeal to raise funds for the estimated $2 million, which still needs to be found, hasn't been ruled out, and raising a loan is also an option.
If we do have to borrow a sum of money, which we're not sure the amount yet, that can be quite comfortably managed with the income that we've got at the moment. I mean, the Invercargill City Council puts $400, their licensing trust puts $400 in a year, and the community trust make a significant donation. So the reserves and maintenance account obviously won't be needed for some years with a brand new stadium. So obviously we can service a loan, which is reasonable. We don't want to obviously go more than what we can afford, but sensibly service a loan of up to $2 million is our estimate at the moment.
Trust Chair Acton Smith says central government has been approached to assist with funding.
We're still in the discussions there. We're still optimistic that we may have some help there in the long term. The first responses have been negative, but we haven't abandoned all hope.
He says the board faces new challenges and decisions each day and estimates overall delay costs will be significant.
That will be in the millions. You have a thing called extension of time, which is the contractors, he's set up on there for 2 years, he's now 3 years. So you've got those costs. You've got the holding costs of getting it built. You've got the changes to the design, the engineers' costs. We haven't got a final tally.
The planned reopening is still on track for July 25th, and it's hoped solutions to the funding shortfall can be found before then. Margot Sutherland, South Today News. Food prices have fallen, down slightly on where they were a year ago. According to Statistics New Zealand, food prices fell 0.3% in February and are down 0.1% on a year ago. Prices manager Chris Pike says the lower prices in February reflect cheaper meat and seasonally lower prices for fruit and vegetables. For the year to February, grocery food was the main contributor to the drop, falling just over 2%. Meat, poultry and fish prices also fell, while fruit and vegetable prices rose more than 6%. Pupils at Invercargill's Fernworth Primary School today got to interact with some sporting superstars. Retired rugby players Aroni Clark and Hoani McDonald, along with former Tall Black Paul Henare, launched the Cracker Jacks program at the school this afternoon. The health and physical education resource is designed to build character and promotes learning through the language and experience of sport. More than 335 children took part in today's launch, with Fernworth the first school in the South Island to offer the program. Principal Anne Walker says the school wanted to be part of the program because the way it was delivered and skills taught are what the children need. And sport will have more with Aroni Clark tomorrow night, but next on Sport we profile imported Southern Steel gold shoot Janelle Fowler. From the news team, good night.